This is the Nature of Sound project by Mariah Greenwood. I'm using a Rode shotgun mic plugged into my camera and editing in Premiere. This particular clip from a film called The Matrix is a perfect example of various components of sound. In this scene, Neo and Morpheus are engaged in a gun battle with their enemies. You hear natural sounds in their voices. You hear and see the guns being fired. This is where Foley comes into play to create the sound of a gunshot. There are also perfect examples of time, speed, attack, decay, and sustain. Timing is key here because the sound of the shots being fired need to hit at the right time in sequence with the film. Attack is how hard you hear the gunshots and Neo's feet as he is running to dodge the bullets. Decay was applied in a way that you hear the sound of bullets coming at them from multiple directions and created the audible effect of dread from not knowing whether or not one of them was going to be shot. If you listen closely, you hear how the speed was slowed down to achieve this. As we all know, bullets travel at a rate of about 1,300 feet per second. But this particular scene, they needed to be slowed down both visually and audibly. The slight echo this creates is typically done by adding a decay to the metal on metal or metal on tile sound. The same sound is also a good example of the use of sustain. The decay time was just a couple of seconds, but the sound engineer used a pedal on a keyboard to manipulate the sound to make it appear longer than it really is. This film is also a prime example of pitch and timbre. Both Keanu Reeves and Lawrence Fishburne have good pitch in their natural speaking voices, as well as timbre that can't easily be is a bit different than cinema sound. With cinema, you're in a much larger and controlled space and have a lot more to work with. In broadcast, you likely don't. Unless you've got a reporter out in the field, chances are that you're working in a studio that is much smaller than a sound stage. Edit that. Broadcast sound is a bit different than cinema sound. With cinema, you're in a much larger and more controlled space and have a lot more to work with. In broadcast, you likely don't. Unless you've got a reporter out in the field, chances are that you're working in a studio that is much smaller than a sound stage. and broadcast audio has a significantly tighter audio range than film does. It is because of this that a lot of sound engineers will use compression. Compression by nature is like a gate that only allows certain frequencies to pass through, and you are the one who has to set that gate. One example of a sound engineer using this is a sporting event. Football, for instance, is loud when you're in person, but not so much when you're hearing it on small speakers that are on your television. Compression is what is used to make it sound much louder than it would be. This makes it possible for you to not only hear just the commentators, but also the coaches yelling out plays, the clash of the helmets, and the players communicating with each other. Thank you.
Turn it up.
3rd and 2, and Prescott keeps it and picks up the first down. So the defense goes after Elliott. Dak, good runner, great runner in fact, picks up 13, first down Dallas.
Well, this read was made a little bit easier because you're going to get Deontay Thompson coming down and blocking that 8th man in the box. So the Giants came down, but the Cowboys answered with that with a couple of lead blockers out in front. So really some nice design here tonight by Scott Linehan. Very creative. He was criticized a bit a week ago for not being so creative. He's making up for it so far tonight.
He's been in the crosshairs. North Texas. On the right side. And bounced back. For a loss of maybe 1 yard.
Nice.
Elliott, who has now carried the ball 5 times for 24 yards.
I mean, Alec Ogletree.
Mars' kick will be down in the end zone. Let's take a look at the Dallas defense.
DeMarcus Lawrence, the Boise State